Scientists across the globe, they've warned time and time again about the dangers of climate change and how the damage it will present devastating, not just impacts in the environment, but economically as well across the globe. We're going to see storms, droughts, food shortages here, and there's different approaches on how to get the public really invested. There's this inspirational film that was narrated by Morgan Freeman, also known as the voice of God. It opened this week's UN summit, in fact. Take a look for yourself.
One day, we will wake up to find we have literally changed the face of the earth. We have never faced a crisis this big, but we have never had a better opportunity to solve it. We have everything we need to wake up to a different kind of world. What is needed is a concerted effort. We can make today the day we turn toward the solutions we need. We can make today the day we chart a new course together. We have every reason in the world to act. We can't wait until tomorrow. You can choose today to make a world of difference.
All right, so Morgan tries to inspire, but there is another train of thought, which is if you're going to get the public's attention here, they can't think you can put it off. Got to scare, as I said to the last guest, the bejesus out of folks. And yet another actor is playing that card here, almost the end of days card. Leo DiCaprio, he also spoke before the UN today. We'll talk about actors in the UN in a second, I guess. But DiCaprio says he earns a living playing fictitious characters who often solve fictional problems, and that he believes mankind has looked at climate change the same way. DiCaprio narrated a film as well that takes a look at the threats of mass extinctions.
The argument is over. We are now in an era where humans shape the destiny of our planet. 97% of climate scientists agree that man-made climate change is real and happening right now. Geologists and climatologists are finding that a rapid climate event is happening right before our eyes. Now consider this. Unthinkable and terrifying as it may seem, nearly all life on Earth could go extinct because of man-made climate change. Here's why.
By the end of the Permian mass extinction, 95% of all life on the planet was dead. And why is this important today? Because today, a sixth extinction is underway, one that will test the survival of not just human civilization, but possibly of the human species itself. And it bears a horrifying resemblance to several previous global warming-driven events, like the Permian mass extinction.
I think it is certainly extremely significant that a lot of the main crises of the past are associated with global warming, and so with obvious implications for the present day.
All right, and on that uplifting note, there is one more angle to play here with the public, and that is the truth. Now, this clip from the Global Climate and Health Alliance just gives a snapshot at the grim effect here, not about the causations and the results if we don't do anything to the planet, but also just the simple impacts that will happen if nothing is done.
For many, the words climate change conjure images of polar bears and melting ice caps. But one of the biggest impacts is much closer to home: the threat to our health. The Lancet, one of the world's most influential medical journals, has called climate change the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. The latest report from the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change outlines the impact on human health and well-being. Using the best science available, now more certain than ever, it details the risks and vulnerabilities each country faces. The report describes a world where an additional 25 million children are undernourished, where dangerous infectious diseases like malaria spread to new shores, where natural disasters like Typhoon Haiyan, Hurricane Katrina, floods in the UK and Europe, and bushfires in Australia become more severe, affecting many more people. These pressures are likely to exacerbate poverty, civil unrest, and conflict around the world. But the story doesn't have to end that way.
All right, let's bring in our panel right now to talk about what is the best way to communicate and mobilize the public to something hopefully we all agree is real and we don't have the luxury of time on. Mike Lyons, former Army captain, served in Iraq, also military analyst for CBS News Radio and a senior fellow at the Truman National Security Project in Washington. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Richard St. Paul, Republican strategist, former vice chair for the National Black Republican Association, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. So we heard two, maybe even three different approaches there. There's the fear card, there's the inspiration card. That last one, though, in terms of the instability, food shortages, more unrest in the world here, we see it playing out now already. You're seeing fights over basic things like water and then what happens in the aftermath of natural disasters. This has a real, forget about geopolitical, this has a real national, international security aspect to it too, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The national security aspect is rising seawater, for example, in the Pacific. And one of the PACOM commander a couple years ago actually said that it's a national security concern as waters rise in that part of the world 50 feet. You'll have hundreds of thousands of people displaced, creating sanitarian conditions and mass refugees, of which the expectation is the United States Navy will have this responsibility to pick. So they clearly feel that resources that would be more devoted to defense will have to be devoted to this kind of issue.
Dominic, you've seen all kinds of approaches, some that have worked and others when we've had other crises, not of this level, let's say. I asked the last guest, what's better, inspire or scare? Same question to you.
Fear and scare. This is such a topic that unfortunately most Americans find terribly boring and don't pay attention to. And let's put this in the perspective of half the country doesn't vote. So if you're not voting, you think they're going to pay attention to issues of the environment and global warming and so on. So it's my belief that the sensational element has a leg to it in terms of you. That's the only way you. The stars, that's a good approach, Richard. But the three clips we show, nobody's going to watch that.
Let me put it in a political context for you two guys, because in 2016, one's got to think, or at least hope, this will be an issue for the presidential candidates to weigh in on what are you going to do about it. Next year, it's going to be a big issue in France. They're going to have the big global summit here. They tried this 6 years ago, didn't really go anywhere, but they believe there'll be more international attention. If the question comes back to the states and say, all right, we're going to have to build seawalls in Miami, we're going to have to deal with forestation or whatever in the middle of the country, we're going to have to do a whole bunch of things that are going to cost a whole bunch of money. And it might mean raising taxes, changing emission standards, and all the rest. Is it a political winner or loser for the candidate who says this ain't going to be pretty, like FDR did back in the 30s, but we got to do it?
So far, it's been a political loser. If you look at when both the House and the Senate were under Democratic control, and Obama tried to push through climate change, it did not pass.
Yep. It's
simple. You have the E in environment. Well, what trumps it is the E in economics. Because when you have states like West Virginia who depend on coal, and you have the Obama administration who's been stigmatized as waging a war on coal, the economics will always win. And those folks who are in Democratic states with energy, oil, and coal, those representatives will vote against climate change, because essentially what you have to do is almost declare war on those type of industries.
Historically, he's right, Andrew, but is there a tipping point where they say, you know what, I still want a place for my grandkids?
No, I think voters tend to look at themselves and think of themselves and their more immediate concerns before anything else. But I think you guys are very close to what might be a winnable solution, which isn't, boy, we have to bite the bullet and pay the cost now. It's we're being taxed right now by our inefficient and foolhardy ways. We're all paying a tax right now because of poor emissions. We're all paying a tax right now because of health consequences. And not only can you save money by altering that course, but you can actually make money doing it. Get the market involved and find me the economically viable way that everybody can make money off of going green and being more conscious about this, whether that's the government stimulating the process or whatever the case may be, and you can actually find a path to getting something done.
But how do you answer the question that says, all right, let's say I even get the country to get on board here, right? And politically, there's price to pay for inaction. They're going to turn around and say, yeah, look at China, look at India. They're not playing by our same rules. Why do we have to pay the price here to be the good guys when they're not? And it's not like there's a little halo around our country and the rest of the environment isn't impacted by them. How does that come into it, where if everybody doesn't go along, we don't get along?
Yeah, leadership is the issue here, and that's exactly your point. China would say that the United States went through its industrial revolution 150, 200 years ago, and that's what you did. You scarred the earth. Well, guess what? It's our turn now. This is what we're going to do. So come back when we're finished. So it's going to, is there a world leader that can get out in front of it? I'm not sure.
But China's actually doing a lot right now. I mean, just because of the smog issues that they have, they're actually starting to take some steps to try to reduce more immediate pollution concerns and the unintended consequences that it's actually improving.
It's funny you mention that, because our air quality, it's amazing the improvements that have been made to air quality in the States. You don't have to go, halfway around the world to find an example. New York's air quality, LA's air quality, But I brought that up to somebody, like, yeah, so what? So it's hard to find, as Dominic said, the connectivity with the public to say, this is something we got to deal with it, and we can show all the real images to say, you think Katrina was bad? You think what happened with Sandy? You want to go through that? Who wants to go through that every 2 or 3 years? Or maybe even worse. Anybody who thinks it's a storm of the century is kidding themselves. That's the part, I don't know. I mean, that's the part that if the person who can connect on that one, and Andrew's right, we'll save money in the long term if we do it. If we don't kill Dominic in the process.
I'm sorry.
I think to Mike's point, I mean, look, this is not just a U.S. solution. This is a global solution. And China and India, who are
okay, but if I follow that
big,
logic, if they don't do anything, then we shouldn't either?
Well, but look, China and India are a long way from passing the Clean Water Act or Clean Air Act, which we passed over 30 years ago. And we're seeing, as you pointed out, the significance of that, which are better quality, better waterways, better air. And they're a long way from doing that. So it's about leadership. Somebody's got to step up to the plate, or things have to get serious enough where people are scared to death. We have tsunamis on every land, and then people will change their mind. That's the way.
Yeah, but if we're neighbors and you're dumping your trash all over the lawn and just throwing things in the sewer or whatever, that's not an argument that says that I should do that. Why shouldn't I act in the best interest of everybody I can, regardless of what my neighbors are doing? It's the right thing to do.
Well, I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing impact. The impact is minimum if we're not all on board.
But we got to do it.
But we are now, and as I said before, we have taken steps decades ago to move towards.
But if you're both manufacturing the same product and he's selling it cheaper because he's doing that, then that factor.
That's the economic incentive.
Well, then let's tax him.
We can't. Well.
Or incentivize me.
I mean, we see right now, we're going to talk about this in a minute, hundreds of thousands of refugees in the Middle East. Imagine what happens. We don't have to think too hard. Remember the Dust Bowl? Like, whole parts of this country are uninhabitable. When people start fighting, like they're going to start doing in Nevada and California, Arizona, even more than they are 20 years from now, over water in this country, and you got forest fires on the day, forget about every week, in certain parts of this country, what do we say then? I mean, and I don't have the answer. Smarter people than me are going to figure out what to do about it.
We go to war, the biggest gun wins.
With who? Ourselves?
Look, as you know, most wars are caused because of lack of resources. That's why we go to war.
That's religion, actually. All right. When we come back here talking about war, the U.S. air assaults on ISIS militants in Syria are underway. And get this, we actually got some company here. Arab allies have launched more than 200 airstrikes against about a dozen militant targets since Monday even. The question is, will the strikes get the job done here? Mike's going to tell us more on that after this.